about 95% of the wool is strong wool, with 37 to 38 micron, which goes into the cover trade or upholsteries, whereas the sexy wools that around the merino wool, which goes into they're really personal items. They're a pair of shoes, they're a suit, they're a shirt, they're a jumper type of thing, which are really different purchase when you're a consumer. And you go into a shop and you go, well, okay, I want to look really good, and I want to put a garment on. So a wool garment, I understand that a wee bit better than I do to the carpet trade. And the wool carpet trade has got beaten up by the synthetics, the rhino carpets and their likes. They've come out and it's absolutely obliterated us. And
okay,
a whole heap more money to do that as well.
So it's now or never for wool, says Wool Chair William Beaton. So this is crunch time for wool. What are you going to do? Are you going to do an international campaign, the likes of which was done with kiwi fruit back in the day with Zespri, something of that scale?
Yeah, and once again, that brings up a whole other issue. There's no one mandated body within New Zealand for the wool industry like there is the beef and lamb or the zestberry or the fisheries. Like that, it's not mandated. So there is Prince Charles runs a campaign for wool, but
he wrote a letter to you.
He did.
I've got it in front of me. I've got a letter by Prince Charles, giving him from Clarence House your support. I'm thinking of everyone involved with the campaign for wool as you struggle to deal with your challenges.
Yeah, and that's a global challenge too. That's just not a New Zealand challenge. That's a global challenge, and that's what I think we've got to remember. And once again, I think yes, we can come up with new products, and that's part of the revitalisation of the wool industry, but you've also got to remember that we need to tell people about this great product we've got and really look at it and educate people. Now, the campaign for wool in New Zealand has actually got educational containers in intermediate schools in both the North and South Island that takes intermediate kids through the life cycle of a tennis ball. And you go, why a tennis ball? Well, a tennis ball is because it's made, the good ones that go to Wimbledon, British Open, etc., are all made from 100% New Zealand wool. And so we take them through the life cycle of the tennis ball, but more in depth around that too. And it's all interactive. So there's some really good stuff happening, but we need to do that on a much bigger scale.
Okay, Craig, thanks for joining us there. Craig Smith, the chair of the National Council of New Zealand Wool Interests. So a bit of a national interest story, perhaps. Catherine, we need to promote wool a bit more. Someone says, can wool be used for insulation? Joan says that. Yes, it absolutely can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, wool insulation is excellent.
I think it's symptomatic, Wallace, I think, of over the years there's been this gradual and steady reduction of manufacturing sector.
Right.
There's more and more things which are no longer made in New Zealand. And I think we're now seeing that wool is one of those victims, if you like, of let's buy stuff from overseas, let's import stuff ourselves from overseas.
Wasn't Timaru a great textile base? A lot of
absolutely, it used to be.
The likes of Zambezi and Nomdi used to make their wares from garment makers and textile makers in Timaru.
Yes,
we need to be the equivalent of Harris Tweed.
We do.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Love it. You've been wonderful today, Catherine Robinson and Jock Anderson. Thank you very much for being on the panel this afternoon. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow for Wednesday's show. Till then, bye. Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe kei te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei. A stoush breaks out over research questioning the credibility of a green housing certification. The lifesavers turning into litter. Aucklanders are reminded to put their single-use face masks in the bin or potentially face fines. High school students in the super city get thrown another lifeline and a few extra NCEA credits. And speaking of lolly scrambles, today's election campaign promises include a hospital rebuild and a revamp of pay wave fees. The government unveils a $47 million incentive scheme to spur travel agents into getting refunds for clients. And double delight at Auckland Zoo. If you thought the dancing rhino was a winner, you won't want to miss this one.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. NetSafe is issuing warnings to schools and parents after a disturbing video dealing with suicide was shared on social media. The images were live streamed on Facebook and shared to platforms including TikTok. NetSafe's Chief Executive Martin Cocker says staff are working directly with social media companies.
NetSafe has very good relationships with the main social media platforms, and so as New Zealanders report in disturbing content they find on those platforms, we then work with the platforms to have it recognised and removed.
Martin Cocker says NetSafe has received 7 reports about the video. The Auckland Mayor says discarded single-use masks in streets and parks pose a health risk. Phil Goff says council staff have noticed an increase in mask litter, particularly in green spaces such as reserves. He says if someone with COVID-19 sneezes into a mask and doesn't dispose of it safely, that could further the spread.
It's really important to dispose of that safely so you don't get kids coming along and picking them up and playing with them. There is a potential risk there. It's not a huge risk, but it is a real risk.
Phil Goff says reusable masks are a good solution as long as they are regularly washed. A business advocacy group says moves to slash paywave fees are well overdue. Labor is pledging to regulate the merchant service fees that banks charge small businesses to use credit card and contactless payments. Visa and MasterCard already agreed to help reduce this fee last month, along with Westpac and BNZ. The Chief Executive of Small Business Voice, Max Whitehead, says the fees can be crippling for businesses, which are already dealing with pressures of COVID-19. National's Judith Collins has made another big-ticket spending promise on the campaign trail, an upgrade of Hawke's Bay Hospital. It comes with a price tag of $400 to $500 million. Labor's criticised National as being in a shambles and promising spending without saying where it will come from. Speaking in Hastings, Ms Collins said National does have a plan for how it will pay for election commitments.
It is funding that will be coming out of the budgets, obviously, and that it will be dealt with in our fiscal plan. But of course, the rebuild itself, with the starting in 2025, that will be part of our fiscal plan.
Judith Collins says Labor should also come under scrutiny for the vast amounts it intends to borrow. The head of Flight Centre New Zealand says a support package for travel agents will keep them afloat so they can recoup the costs of cancelled holidays. Almost $700 million spent on overseas holidays is locked up overseas because of travel cancelled due to COVID-19. The government has announced today a $47.5 million travel reimbursement scheme that will help travel agents get the money back. David Coombs says the fund will allow the sector to keep trading.
It's a rebate in recognition of the costs of repatriating customers' funds in an environment where the agency sector is not generating any revenue, but incurring costs to make sure that we're looking after our customers.
The Consumer Affairs Minister says the scheme will increase the likelihood of consumers recovering refunds and credits owed to them. The government is being urged to make a quick decision on the future of live animal exports as thousands of cows wait on quarantine farms. The Ministry for Primary Industries halted live exports after the sinking of the Gulf Livestock 1, which went down in the East China Sea nearly a week ago. The ship had 43 crew, including 2 New Zealanders, and nearly 6,000 cattle on board. Federated Farmers President Andrew Hogarth says the options for the cattle in quarantine are limited if they can't be exported.
If they're not able to be sold or they are surplus to requirements, so really there is very little options. They'd probably end up having to be slaughtered.
Andrew Hogarth says farmers need to know when or if exports can resume. It's 4 minutes past 5. The former Silver Fern captain Leslie Nichol is one of 2 women added to the Gymnastics New Zealand review panel to investigate complaints about the culture of the sport. Nichol and former international gymnast and high-performance coach Rachel Vickery join independent reviewer David Hellman as Felicity Reid reports.
The review was set up following allegations of physical and mental abuse from both former and current athletes. Investigation panel head David Hellman says Nichol and Vickery will assist with investigations and be available for anyone coming forward who'd feel more comfortable sharing their experiences and observations with a female. The terms of reference for the review ensure that Hellman can add panel members where necessary, including expert input into the well-being of children and young people should that be required. This is Felicity Reid.
World men's tennis number one Novak Djokovic is urging his fans to leave a US Open line judge alone after she received online abuse over the incident that led to his disqualification. Djokovic blindly hit the ball away behind him in frustration and hit the female line judge in the throat. He has apologised and on social media said the woman has done nothing wrong and asked his fans to be supportive of her. The Boston Celtics have taken a 3-2 lead in their best-of-7 Eastern Conference NBA basketball semi-final series against the Toronto Raptors with a 111-89 win in Game 5. That's the news.
Testing times.
For us, it's easy. We just tell our staff who've been on port, who are higher risk workers, so that's people who go on ship, we just tell them go and get tested.
A council tussle in Tauranga.
There's no demonstrable improvement in the interpersonal space because I think people are avoiding each other and just trying to confine their interactions to the professional space.
And time off for Matariki.
There are things that we should be moving forward with as a nation that will only strengthen our identity.
Tune in. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine weather apart from cloudy periods for Northland and elsewhere tomorrow evening. Waikato to Manawatu, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape, fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow, with patchy drizzle about the Tararoa Ranges and the coast at night. Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and northern Canterbury, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing tonight with drizzle developing tomorrow morning, turning to rain tomorrow evening, possibly heavy in Westland. Southern Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine tonight, rain spreading north tomorrow with snow lowering to 900 metres at night. Norwesterlies rising to severe gale in exposed places for a time tomorrow. Fiordland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, turning to rain with heavy falls tomorrow morning, then clearing in the afternoon, showers developing at night. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, the battle brewing over whether green certified homes are all they're cracked up to be. But we begin on the campaign trail where Labor is promising to slash the cost of PayWave and extend the small business cash flow loan scheme if it's re-elected. Leader Jacinda Ardern announced a raft of policies while campaigning in Tauranga today in a bid to show Labor is the party for small business. But National says Labor's promises are just a fig leaf, covering up all the other costs it has piled on to small businesses. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Oh, thank you both. Thank you for coming to say hello.
Jacinda Ardern receiving a warm reception from those lunching in the sun at Tauranga Historic Village.
I hope you know you're such a different. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you very much.
Here to visit the Whipped Bakery, which received $2,000 in COVID-19 business advisory support funding.
How many we come out of COVID with 5 and we're back up to 13.
Owners Francis and Aaron Cooper say government support has helped them bounce back.
If we didn't have the wage subsidy, we wouldn't have been reopening. You know, we would have been back to the markets, scraping by. We would have had to let go of all our staff. With the help of our business mentor and the help Jacinda and her team have given us, I think we're thriving.
Labor is promising to tighten regulation to reduce the amount banks can charge retailers for PayWave and card transactions. Mrs. Cooper says this would be huge for retailers. She says they stopped offering it to customers because it was too expensive.
But then obviously when COVID came in level 3, we decided to get it back and we've kept it because it's essential.
Ms. Ardern says she wants PayWave to be more accessible for smaller operators.
We want to make it a safe means of transaction, but also a cheaper one. Relative to New Zealand, some estimates claim our retailers in particular are paying 50% more in some cases than their Australian counterparts.
Just how much the fees would reduce by or when is unclear, but Ms. Ardern says Labor will make it happen as soon as possible. New Zealand Bankers Association Chief Executive Roger Beaumont declined an interview, but in a statement says they look forward to seeing the detail of what's being proposed in this complex area, and they would be happy to engage in consultation. He says the fees currently provide benefits for consumers, including the cost of fraud reimbursement and loyalty schemes. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is on board with Labour's move.
Any program that has, with practical common sense and logic, the intent to get rid of needless red tape should be supported.
National is supportive too, but leader Judith Collins says it doesn't cover up the costs that are hurting small businesses, like the minimum wage increase, fuel taxes and 90-day trials.
What I would say, though, it's a bit of a fig leaf to cover all the other costs that they've landed onto small business. So it's a pretty small fig leaf too.
Labour is also promising to extend the small business cash flow loan scheme for 3 years and to extend the interest-free period to 2 years. Ms Ardern says the scheme is about helping vulnerable but viable businesses weather the COVID storm. And so far, 95,000 businesses have taken it up.
Because of that popularity, we can see that there continues to be need and will continue to be need for the near term to that facility.
But National says if Labour's big plan for small business is to offer more loans and to get deeper into debt, it shows how out of touch the party is. And it says 6 weeks out from the election, there's still no certainty on what taxes will look like under Labour. From Tauranga for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
The National Party is promising a major rebuild of Hawke's Bay Hospital if elected, with diggers on site by 2025. Judith Collins made the announcement in Hastings this morning. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, was there.
A second day in the Hawke's Bay for Judith Collins and another announcement.
Great big fat one too. You'll love it. I know you'll really love it.
That's because this announcement was tailor-made for the region. Hawke's Bay Hospital in line for a makeover. The dated facility made headlines over summer due to its lack of air conditioning. Patients were given ice blocks to cope with the sweltering 30-degree heat. The facilities are old, its capacity cramped, and the locals know it.
With our experience overnight, the facilities are good, but I guess they're not up to the expected standard that we thought it would be, especially for our newborn.
It'd be good if they had an update in there, and Hawke's Bay needs something like this to happen, and we deserve it anyway.
This hospital is due for a rebuild.
The DHB is planning a massive upgrade, but it is at least a decade away. National wants to fast-track it with diggers on the ground in 2025. It's promising a full rebuild of the main hospital block and an upgrade of the emergency department. A $500 million promise.
It's a lot of money, but actually now's the time to get the infrastructure built, and that's what we're committing to today.
National would also roll out air conditioning right away at a cost of $7 million. That wouldn't wait for the rebuild, meaning some would go into buildings which would then be demolished several years later.
I just don't want to say to people for the next 4 or 5 years, oh, don't worry, it'll get cooler later on.
The rush of announcing, we're going to start air conditioning the tower block to only then pull it down, I think that showed a rush put through policy.
Anna Lorke is Labour's candidate for the Tuki electorate and sits on the local DHB. She says a rebuild will happen eventually, but there are more important priorities right now.
It is a dinosaur of a building, but I think in looking at the real health needs and getting access to quality healthcare and services, we need faster access to cancer treatment and diagnostics. So that's where we can save lives.
Tuki has always been National Party territory, but the margin has narrowed in recent elections. In 2017, National's Lawrence Yule, the former Hastings mayor, won with a just 2,800 vote lead. And the swing in polling towards Labour across the country means that's likely to get even tighter.
I'm confident. I understand that the polls have changed a bit, but my polling indicates people are sticking with me.
His fate as an MP will depend on it. At number 33 on National's list, he's unlikely to make it back if he doesn't hold on to his seat. From Hastings for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
A stoush has broken out over research that challenges whether green certified homes are actually warmer, drier and healthier than a typical new build, as is claimed. The study by 2 Auckland University researchers measured indoor temperatures of 30 social houses, including Homestar properties with a 6-star rating, compared to code-compliant new builds and older homes. During winter, the research found the Homestar rated houses spent 56% of the time below the World Health Organisation's recommended temperature of 18 degrees. The newly built code-compliant homes dropped below that temperature 64% of the time, a difference the researchers say is statistically insignificant. In summer, the 6 Homestar rated houses chronically overheated 75% of the time, compared to 58% of the time for the non-certified houses. The Homestar rating system, run by the Green Building Council, is supposed to measure the health and energy efficiency of a home, and the council claims a 6-star rating or higher means the home will be easier and more cost-effective to keep warm and healthy than a typical new house built to building code. One of the researchers, Rochelle Aid, alleges that since sharing the results that challenge the rating system, the Green Building Council has been trying to undermine the study and her personal reputation. We spoke earlier and I started by asking what the implications of her study are.
The Commerce Commission has just recently issued some environmental guidelines explaining how companies that sell products or services have to have evidence that backs up their claims if they're making claims around the environment. It's really clear to people that this would apply to things like free-range eggs or, say, heat pumps. But in the context of green building, do those guidelines also apply to their claims? So if the academic evidence that we have discovered shows that the 6 Homestar ratings weren't performing in the manner that is claimed, is that a breach of those guidelines and maybe a breach of the Fair Trading Act? It could be some serious implications for architects, engineers, banks, anybody who has been repeating these claims about 6 Homestar.
So is the Homestar rating system, is it a gimmick?
I wouldn't call it a gimmick. It certainly came from a good place. I know this because I was involved in creating the system in the first place. And I've worked as a Homestar assessor for many years. If I was going to put my hand on my heart when I started my doctoral research, I was hoping that my evidence would prove complementary to the rating tool. However, the opposite unfortunately appeared to be the case, and the evidence that we gathered through real-time data loggers and actual measurements of the houses has proven contrary. Now, to be clear, this was a case study of 30 houses in Auckland, so the findings are at this time limited to social housing in Auckland. I believe they could be replicated across different social housing in Auckland, but I wouldn't want to say that these findings would be found, say, in Wellington or Christchurch at this time. And it really shows, though, that we need to do more research in this space. We need to know how these houses are performing in Christchurch and Wellington. Are the 6 Homestar dwellings that Kainga Ora are currently building and rolling out around the country, are they providing warm, dry, comfortable houses for the occupants? We don't know. No one's measured them.
Okay, so Kainga Ora has made a commitment to have these certifications, this Homestar certification on new builds. Should they be going ahead, given what you've found in the research, particularly if it costs us more?
That's a really tough question. I personally, if you're asking for my opinion, I don't believe they should be using 6 Homestar. I think they should be using a standard that has an evidential basis. And there are other standards out there that have been proven to work. Worldwide, there is some really excellent academic research that's been undertaken on the passive house standard, and that has been proven to deliver warm, dry, comfortable, energy-efficient homes. The only research that's been done on Homestar at this point in time is my research. It hasn't found findings that support the claims of Homestar at this time. That's not to say that additional research in the future may not support the claims, but all that's out there at the moment is our research, which did not find in accordance with the claims of Homestar.
So, you as a person who was involved in developing the Homestar rating system has found it to be significantly flawed upon closer inspection.
I have found that it didn't, or we have found, because I'm not the only researcher here, we've found that it didn't deliver for the houses that we studied on the claims that have been made. Now, was that because the tenants were not heating the dwellings? So I do believe the Green Building Council would never claim that there can be no application of heating to deliver warmer temperatures in a 6 Homestar rated dwelling. That could be the case. However, that's a real concern in a social housing context because social housing tenants suffer from fuel poverty. If the tenant can't afford to apply additional heating to a dwelling, they're going to be cold. Now, what social housing tenants need is a thermal envelope that's going to be warm, dry and comfortable, even if they can't afford to heat their houses or cool their houses. that's not what they're getting. Our research showed that's not what they're getting at this time.
Have you shared this research with the Green Building Council?
I have shared this research with the Green Building Council. That's a little bit of a drama point at the moment, shall we say. So they are aware of the research. We have been talking offline about the research, but I was recently made aware that the New Zealand Green Building Council has written a document and has sent it around to different organisations, one of which sent it back to me, which attempts to position the research as biased and says that I support a different standard and that's why my research findings find the way they do. And even more concerning for me was the fact that it asked for that document to be confidential, kept confidential between the recipients and the New Zealand Green Building Council, giving myself no right of reply to the accusations in this document. So they are aware of the research, that we've tried to engage a little bit around it, but I wouldn't say that there's a great relationship present at the moment.
Why would they do that, do you think?
I genuinely don't understand. I really couldn't comment on why this document was written. My guess would be they feel threatened by the research. So it didn't present findings that support the narrative. It found against the narrative, and it's a very strong narrative. If you look at the media, and I'm going to say you because you all report all the time that Homestar's warm, dry, energy efficient, it's the way of the future, we all need green buildings. But this piece of academic research hasn't supported that particular narrative. Now, when you look at a Green Building Council, and this is all around the world as well, how do they make their money? They make their money through memberships, they make their money through training to do with the green building rating tools, and they make their money through accreditations. So if people don't think the rating works, they're not going to pay to be trained in it or apply it and pay for certifications. And if that's all that they deliver to the market, then why would you be a member? So if research isn't supporting the claims and people start to fall away from the Green Building Council, they could cease to exist. So I would guess maybe they feel threatened. What I would hope is that we can all work together to fix this and to redevelop rating tools that actually do what they deliver.
Before we go, Rochelle, have you got any conflicts of interest, given what you've raised there about what's been circulating and your prior involvement with this particular system? Do you have any conflicts of interest that you feel you need to declare?
I don't believe so. As I said, I helped create the rating system. I was hopeful the research would support the tool and help get some greater adoption. So to find the opposite was actually quite shocking for me. Now, I've been personally through a 3-year journey of trying to assimilate this myself and work out what works and what doesn't work. So I had to leave the company that I used to do the Homestar assessment work for as well because of this research. So I no longer work as a Homestar assessor. I have no ties to it. And this is just unbiased academic research that has been published in academic journals.
And that is researcher Rochelle Aid, and Dr. Michael Ream from the Property Department at the Business School at Auckland University is her co-researcher. In breaking news, 3 teenagers have pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Grace Virtue. The 90-year-old died of a brain injury weeks after she was assaulted and robbed in her home in Levin. The trial for the 3 teenagers began yesterday and they have now pleaded guilty to manslaughter. So that is 3 teenagers have pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Grace Virtue a day after their trial began. It is almost 24 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. On the campaign trail, the promises made there, Labor is promising to lower pay wave fees and extend a small business loan scheme. And National is saying it will invest heavily in the rebuild of Napier Hospital. Let us know what you think of the promises. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The government is being urged to make a quick decision on what it's going to do about live export ships as thousands of cows on quarantine farms face slaughter. The Ministry for Primary Industries put an immediate halt on applications for live shipments after the capsize and sinking of the Gulf Livestock 1, which went down in a typhoon in the East China Sea nearly a week ago. There were 43 crew, including 2 New Zealanders and nearly 6,000 cattle on board. Now, farmers say they need clarity on when or if the export trips will be able to resume. Andrew McRae reports.
About 26,000 cattle are currently on quarantine farms around the country, being readied for a 17-day trip to China. The next ship is due here in about 10 days, so the pressure is on for a decision one way or the other. Federated Farmers President Andrew Hoggard says it's unlikely the cattle in quarantine could be sold in New Zealand, and the options remain very limited if they can't be exported.
They'd probably end up having to be slaughtered, and there'd be a massive loss in value for what you'd get for them. My understanding is these are all dairy replacement heifers, so they're not your traditional beef animals, so your beef return isn't going to be great from them. So, yeah, it's not, I wouldn't think it's not an ideal outcome at all.
He says time is running out.
Get the information that's needed, get the understanding, and my hope is they can get this trade moving again, so long as it's safe to do so.
Mr Hoggard says Federated Farmers supports live exports continuing. Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor says the government needs to be reassured of the safety of livestock exports, which may delay the next scheduled shipment.
We don't want to put animals onto a boat that might put them or their stock handlers and the people at risk.
Mr O'Connor says the government needs to ensure that if people or animals are being put on ships, they'll be safe and they'll get to their destination. Meanwhile, the search is continuing for more survivors from the ship. 40 crew remain missing, including the 2 New Zealanders. 2 Filipino crew members have been rescued alive, but a third man who was picked up died. The search resumed today after being suspended when a second typhoon hit over the weekend. A New Zealand master mariner, Kim Penny, says it's unlikely searching will continue for much longer, and as each day passes, the search area just gets bigger.
Great that they are still contributing. I think that has to be said. I mean, some countries might have decided to no longer keep searching. The fact they are still searching, I think that is really fantastic. That's great that they are seeing hope, and I think probably because they have found the 2 survivors in a body, they'll be seeing that there is that tiniest glimmer of hope.
But she believes the chance of finding any more survivors is slim.
They may drift ashore somewhere as well, but again, it's really, really sad to say, but it'd be unexpected that anyone would be found at this point, I would think.
Kim Penny says had the ship not lost engine power, it would have navigated the typhoon safely. She says claims the ship could have avoided the storm don't stack up.
I'd be guessing its cruising speed is around about 13 to 18 knots, so that's not that fast. It's not as if you're on a plane, you can go, we're just going to divert around that storm. Actually, you kind of, once you're in it, you're in it. You don't have a lot of options for getting out. You can take a path that might minimise your time in it, but you really don't have a lot of options once you're in a ship that's moving that slowly.
The first man plucked out of the water about 12 hours after the vessel went down told the Japan Coast Guard after being thrown overboard by high waves, he caught hold of a cow in the water, desperately held on to it, and then climbed onto a raft and waited rescue. For Checkpoint, call Andrew McRae.
Auckland's secondary students are getting a further boost to their NCEA credits to make up for being out of the classroom during the Super City's second lockdown. Bonus credits were announced for all NCEA students after the first lockdown, while teenagers in the rest of the country get 1 bonus credit for every 5 credits earned. Auckland students will now get 1 bonus credit for every 4 they've earned. Maclean's College Principal Stephen Hargraves told our reporter Nita Blake-Person the news is welcome at such a tense time.
I think there'll be a lot of relieved students, parents and teachers at today's announcement from NZQA. It strikes a nice balance between taking the stress off students worried about not being able to complete their NCEA, but also making sure we've got a credible qualification in NCEA.
How stressed are students at the moment?
They were stressed when they walked into school last week. It was a common theme around the campus. Students really worried about how we're going to make up for that few weeks of lost time with such a short run into the external exams.
So does this go far enough for them?
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, obviously I haven't had time to talk to the students yet, but I think there'll be a sense of relief that they're being listened to, their support. We're hearing their needs and going some way towards, helping them out. I think it's about being part of a package. and this is a really good move.
Do you think there'll be some kids who, didn't need this and it will give them an unfair boost or advantage?
This is one of the clever things about the package, is that the credits aren't actually tagged to any particular subject, and if students don't need them, they will sit on top of their qualification as spare credits, but not really, alter the quality of the qualification they hold. It's a clever mechanism that we've got. It gets students across the line who just fell short and would have got across the line if conditions hadn't been different, but doesn't boost students artificially with topped up grades.
And what does today's boost mean for teachers?
Well, I think it's just like the students in many respects. It's the pressure that we are feeling to cram work and get internals done, and now we will just have that sense of, well, we can prioritise a bit more, and if some things aren't really necessary, then we can strip it back and focus on the essentials to get the students ready for the externals and wrap up key internals.
Are you hopeful this is the last one of these Auckland students, or any students for that matter, will need for NCEA in 2020?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, the last thing we want now would be to go back into level 3 or 4. I think it would just take the wind out of our sails, and we would never really get the year back up again if that happened.
And that was Maclean's College Principal Stephen Hargraves. The government has introduced a $47 million incentive scheme to encourage travel agents to try and recoup clients' money lost due to disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Travel agents will get 7.5% of the value of cash refunds for their customers and 5% of the value of credits secured on customers' behalfs. But as Nick Trubridge reports, there's no help yet for those who booked their trips through now-defunct travel agents.
$700 million of New Zealanders' money is locked up overseas due to COVID-19 travel cancellations. But Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Farfoy today announced struggling travel agencies will be incentivised to get that money back. Agents who secure refunds on behalf of their customers will get 7.5% of the value of the refund. The return for agents is 5% if they secure a credit on their customers' behalf.
Some of the bookings are complex, and the travel agents at the same time have been dealing with this while having virtually zero revenue. So that we've been in talks for a couple of months now in order to come up with a scheme to assist consumers get their money that's tied up back.
But that won't help travellers like Emily Vale. Vale, originally from the UK, booked a trip for April from New Zealand back home through STA Travel. Her trip was cancelled and she was given a credit by STA. She now has no idea where her money is with the airline or with the now defunct travel agent.
I even went to Emirates and they said, hey, look, the travel agent is holding the funds. We've already refunded the funds. And I just constantly got the same response from STA Travel, which was, we do not supply refunds. We were unable to give you a refund at this time.
Long story short, Vale is now over $4,000 out of pocket. She says the whole saga has been emotionally stressful. Times are tough and Vale has already taken a pay cut at work.
I have no idea where my funds are. I was part of the creditors meeting that was held, the first creditors meeting that was held last week. And the guys from Deloitte, who are the administrators for STA now, even said themselves, STA have got no money. There's no money there for them to be issuing refunds. So that does beg the question as to, where have they sent all of this money that all of these customers have paid? Because if the airline's not got it and STA hasn't got it, where is it? It's not just vanished,
Vale says people in her position need help, whether it's from other travel agents fighting on her behalf or the government.
Any resolution or any solution that they can come up with that gives me a slight piece of hope that my money is somewhere, I'd be keen to hear.
Mr Farfoy says ways to help those still out of pocket after their travel agents gone to ground are also being explored.
With our discussions with the travel agents, they are very keen to take a whole of sector approach. So if there's the ability to work with bookings that they may not have necessarily taken, there might be some opportunity in that for them as well.
House of Travel's Brent Thomas says that is a possible way forward for those still out of pocket after their travel agents close close down. However, agents' core business will get priority.
Our key has always been client-focused. Obviously, there are a number of travel agents who are no longer through this process, and obviously that'll be something that we can look at down the track as to how do we best support customers who have been impacted where the travel agent is no longer in existence. But that'll be something that will have to be done at an industry level, and we can see what we can do working with the Minister on those options down the track.
The Consumer Travel Reimbursement Scheme is expected to cost up to $47 million, providing a resolution for some Kiwis with clipped wings. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, a court hears a gang associate drove through Auckland with $1 million in cash to buy a meth ingredient. Life-saving masks are turning into litter on the streets of Auckland, and two of the cutest little creatures you could imagine, and by little we mean tiny, at Auckland Zoo. We would love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or Facebook as Checkpoint. And we'd love to hear what you think about the campaign promises today. Also, this incentive fund of $47 million for travel agents to get money back from people whose COVID travel has been disrupted. Do get in touch. It's time now for the headlines with Susanna.
3 teenage girls have pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of a 90-year-old live-in woman. Grace Virtue died from a brain injury 3 weeks after a home invasion and assault in November last year. The teens have been on trial for murder at the High Court in Palmerston North. They will be sentenced on November the 13th. Schools and parents are being warned about a disturbing video that's being shared online. NetSafe is working directly with social media companies to get the video that deals with suicide taken down. A researcher believes Kāinga Ora should not be using an environmental certification rating run by the Green Building Council for new homes. A study by Auckland University has found 6 Homestar rated houses to be less energy efficient than non-certified builds. Auckland's Mayor says a recent increase in mask litter poses a COVID-19 health risk. Phil Goff is urging residents to dispose of single-use masks properly after council staff reported a rise in masks discarded in streets and green spaces. A business advocacy group says pay wave fees can be crippling for businesses. Labor is pledging to regulate the merchant service fees that banks charge small businesses to use credit card and contactless payments. Small Business Voice says the move is long overdue. Flight Centre New Zealand says a support package for travel agents will allow the sector to keep trading. The government has today announced a $47.5 million reimbursement scheme to help travel agents recoup money locked up overseas from cancelled holidays. And one person has died following a motorcycle crash on State Highway 38 in Hawke's Bay. The accident happened just after 11 o'clock this morning at Tuai, north of Wairoa. Inquiries into the circumstances of the crash are ongoing. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. You've tuned in just in time for the business news with Nicholas Poynton, who joins me now in the studio. Nicholas, we've got a tale I'm picking of two halves here, two very different half-year results showing, well, the experiences of retailers during this pandemic. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we've got some interesting results indeed. These are half-year results from the Briscoes Group and restaurant brands that came out today. And what they tell us is that New Zealanders have more of an appetite through the first 6 months of the year for sporting and home goods than they actually do for fast food. And this is reflected in the results. Briscoes Group, they also own Rebel Sport. They managed to post a half-year profit of $28 million. That's almost in line. It's only down about $300,000 for the result for the half last year. And what they're saying is that during the lockdown, yes, they did experience a significant slump in sales, but during level 4, they were allowed to still continue to sell essential items online. These are things like heaters or warm clothing and the like. And they say that when they went to level 3 and then to level 2, they saw a swift rebound rebound in sales, and this was supported by pent-up demand. People weren't really able to spend much of their money during lockdown, and also cooler weather. People were pretty cold coming out of lockdown, apparently, and they were looking to buy warmer clothes.
And people were baking like Topsy as well, and they sell all sorts of kitchen products and all the rest of it. It was muffin and scone central.
You can imagine they were pretty well set up for people during lockdown. Also, people picking up sports and things like that during lockdown. Well, you compare this with restaurant brands. They own KFC, Pizza Hut, Carl's Jr., Taco Bell. They actually posted their half-year net profit was down 40% to $10 million for the year, as they say they lost about $10 million a week during alert level 4 lockdown. They say they couldn't trade until we got to alert level 3, and even then it was just takeaways. They couldn't really get all those people coming through the restaurant, sitting up there, maybe going up for another item. They missed out there, and they say the figure would have been worse if they didn't receive that $22 million in government wage subsidies. They say that money did allow them to retain 100% of its staff, which is probably a pretty good sign. And they say despite the hit they experienced during lockdown, that they are now trading above levels seen last year, and they've got a pretty positive outlook. They say they're going to open a total of 4 new stores. It's 2 new KFCs and 2 new Taco Bells by the end of their current financial year.
Okay. Let's turn to IRD now, which is sort of suggesting it's going to start going after crypto investors who aren't meeting their tax obligations. Now, this is interesting. How are they going to do that?
Yeah, so I know cryptocurrency, it's one of those topics that sort of confuse many and sort of intrigue a few. But look, this is the reason why this is interesting, given the implications that IRD is laying out. They've put out some new guidelines about how they're going to tax people who have crypto assets. Currently, cryptocurrencies, there's no specific tax regime that encompasses them. They're very unique. So currently, they're treated as property. That's how, for tax purposes. So these new guidelines aim to sort of set out to people how they're expected to pay tax on crypto assets that they're buying, trading, selling, mining, and the like. And it also gives them a bit of a heads up on how they should calculate the value of their assets in New Zealand dollars. I spoke to a lawyer from Bell Gully today. They're an expert in tax and also have a bit of an interest in cryptocurrencies, and they say that these guidelines they help. They're giving people a lot more a lot more advice in this area. But there's still a lot more work to be done, because cryptocurrencies, for people who do know a little bit about them, they are a rapidly evolving area of technology and finance. And the issue is that legislation is always struggling to keep up with pace. But the interesting thing that this legal expert said was that he read this new announcement from IRD as a signal that they are going to start taking a lot more interest in these particular assets and the taxes that people are or are not paying on them.
Well, the interesting thing about that is, how do they know you've even got them? Because the tax person can see you've got a house or you're driving a particular car if it's assessing assets, but how do they even know that you've got a stash of Bitcoin somewhere?
These are all interesting things. I guess we'll be paying a lot of attention now to all the future comments to come out of IRD about this, because it is in a way, it is kind of exciting to see how they're going to approach this, to see how they're going to ensure that people are meeting those obligations in the future.
Yeah, getting ahead of the ball, so to speak. Okay, so what else was happening on the markets for us today?
Yeah, today the NZX Top 50 is up by about 1/3%, by about 36 points to 11,895. Our dollar is at 66.8 US cents, 91.8 Australian and 50.8 British pence. And gold is down by about $2.50 to $1,926 US an ounce.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business wrap. Māori bowel cancer patients are disappointed the Ministry of Health won't drop the age for Māori and Pacifica to get onto the National Cancer Screening Program. The Ministry's own expert advisory group recommended the age should be 50 instead of 60, but that's been rejected because the current program is already under pressure. Mediana Johnson reports.
Wanganui woman Esther Tenero has had bowel cancer for 4 years. She doesn't know how much time she has left, choosing not to ask and instead taking every day as it comes.
We'll just take each step as it comes. I've just been through 6 months of chemotherapy as well as an unfunded drug, cetuximab, that I had to fund myself, and with good results. So basically I'm in remission for now.
Tinero was just 51 when she was diagnosed with bowel cancer, although she'd been having symptoms for 18 months prior. She had to fight her GP to get tested and says a screening program would have meant the disease was caught much sooner.
For the government to come out and say that, they won't lower the age for bowel screening is really disappointing because Māori feature highly in that. And we're twice as more likely to die from bowel cancer than non-Māori. So it's a pretty disappointing announcement for me, having contracted the disease when I was 51.
A Ministry of Health report on the National Bowel Screening Program and Equity says it is experiencing higher than forecast demand for screening services, which is placing pressure on colonoscopy capacity. It says it is important to prioritise screening programs for cancers with higher inequities for Māori, such as lung cancer, although there is no existing program for this. Hawera man and bowel cancer patient Archie Hurunui says that's not good enough.
I think it's a weak excuse. They spend, money on a number of other things that we don't get to see. So the evidence out there at the moment is that our health system is not that great, and we need to contribute more money to it.
He says while 50 is a good age for screening, he'd like the program to target Māori even younger than that.
I'm even thinking 35, because that's the thing. We can't label you're going to get colon cancer at this particular age because you don't know until you actually do that investigative stuff and you find out things aren't happening too well with your body. Then all of a sudden you're going, oh no, you've got cancer.
The chair of Hei Ahuru Mōwai, the National Māori Cancer Leadership Group, Dr Nina Scott, says that to get rid of the equity gap, the age range for Māori and Pacific must be dropped. She's also worried that Māori health leaders aren't being listened to.
Māori get bowel cancer younger, but also the impacts of bowel screening are going to be much, much higher for the New Zealand European group, and that means that we're going to grow the equity gap.
Dr Scott says a national screening pilot program run between 2012 and 2017 screened Māori from age 50, so she didn't understand why it couldn't be done now.
The arguments keep going around and around about why that can't happen, and the rationale keeps changing. So I think fundamentally people just don't want it to happen.
The Ministry of Health report recommends looking again at lowering the age for screening for Māori and Pacifica once the national program is fully rolled out at the end of next year. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
It's 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Aucklanders could be fined up to $400 for chucking their single-use face masks on the street after an increase in face coverings littering the super city's streets. At level 2, the masks are compulsory on public transport and people are being encouraged to wear them in situations where they can't social distance. The council says its rubbish collectors have noticed more masks discarded in parks, reserves and on the streets. We sent our reporter Katie Doyle and cameraman Dan Cook out onto the streets to see how people are getting on with masking up.
I've just got a reusable cloth mask on at the moment that we bought from a little boutique around the corner from my house. Yeah.
Why reusable over disposable for you?
We just felt like it would be easier to just, wash it, get it back, than needing to get reusable ones and then throw them away the whole time. It seems a bit of a waste.
Well, it's not good for the environment for disposable masks, so I think everyone should be making their own. That's a good thing. But, if you don't have time, then like I didn't, then you would wear a disposable mask, I guess.
Would you dob someone in if you saw them throwing their mask on the ground?
Yeah. Yeah, I would.
How often do you dispose of your disposable mask when you're using it?
It depends. Sometimes several times. Especially when I'm out and when I eat, sometimes I'll use a different mask after I take it off. And sometimes I'll just fold it up so that the inside's covered.
And how do you dispose of it?
I cut the strings and I pull it out first and then I'll just throw it in the bin.
Disposable is expensive, hard to get, and it just seemed like the better idea.
Walking around Auckland, have you seen any increases in the number of disposable masks on streets and just discarded maybe next to bins?
Well, I don't know about increase, but certainly I've noticed at least one mask lying on the ground, yeah.
And it's those ones lying around on the ground that have caught the council's attention. Councillor Richard Hills says fines are a last resort, but Aucklanders need to lift their game.
First of all, we just want to congratulate everyone who is wearing masks. Obviously, they're compulsory on our public transport system, but we're still encouraging them whenever people are out and around strangers. But we are seeing, inevitably, because there's a new product being used so much, there is a lot of litter around our streets and parks and sort of around our public transport areas. So people are just, not many, we're not seeing a huge amount, but we're starting to see a bit of an uptick of people dropping those masks in the gutters and around the bins. And we're just asking people, take them home, put them in your household rubbish bin and dispose of them safely, just for, the health and safety of our workers especially.
Richard, where is the problem concentrated and what kind of volumes are you talking about?
Yeah, our contractors are saying it's a sort of a couple hundred a day around the city. So we're not seeing, monumental numbers of masks around, but if it grows, it's pretty bad for our environment. And of course, when it rains, those masks head down the waterways and into our beaches and oceans. So we're just, really keen for people to take those masks home. It's not a massive issue, but our contractors have obviously seen a spike, much like you see when we have, had plastic bags or, other types of rubbish that just kind of gets strewn either accidentally or on purpose rather than put in your household bin.
So I'm picking you're talking about these surgical one-use masks, yes? Would that be the ones we're talking about, Richard?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, of course, we would love people to have access to or make their own reusable masks, and we're not shaming anyone for using those single-use masks because they are a lot easier for some people, or they may be the only things people have access to. So it's not about so much focus on the reusable. It's actually just ensuring that those surgical masks are going in the bin. And then obviously long-term, if you can, make or access some reusable masks that will help the environment overall in the end.
Those masks, what happens to them? Do they decompose readily? Can they be recycled? What can you tell us about that?
No. I think the health and safety implications of trying to recycle it would be, I don't even think you'd try to do that, but it's definitely not a material that breaks down. And generally anything that's put in the general waste will not break down anyway. But those masks, they'll last for a long time. There's different plastics and synthetic materials in there, and that's to protect our health. But generally just sticking them in your household waste is going to protect everyone. But they definitely don't break down, and they will just sit in the drains and end up making their way out to our beaches.
You're emphasising the fact that you want people to put them in their home rubbish bin. Why is that?
I mean, obviously, if you are on your way and there's a normal bin to stick them in, that's fine. But generally, your household bin is going to be the most sanitary and the most safe place to stick them. And, there is often people stick them in the bins and the wind will rip them out or whatever. And it's just generally because they're so light and because there's very, very, very low risk to our contractors because they're using their own PPE. But it's just a bit nicer for our contractors and workers to not be picking up people's masks in the public. So if you can, keep them in your bag or your pocket during the day and just pop them in the bin at home. But if you don't want to do that, the very least you can do is just stick them in our normal litter bins around the city, just ensuring they go right in the bin and they're not just at the bin, which is often what we get with all types of rubbish, especially, in the weekends or whatever, when people are just sort of chucking things near the bin at the beaches. It's just masks especially are becoming noticeable because, we haven't been using them ever before to the numbers we've been using. So, of course, people, start sticking them up on social media and stuff and saying, oh, gosh, look at this new bit of litter we're seeing. And but that's with all types of litter. We just would prefer people would not chucking things in the environment for others to pick up.
Okay, so you're obviously giving people the message, put them in the bin. What options are available to you if you keep getting ignored?
There are fines and stuff, but, we have the larger fines for illegal dumping, and, we ask people to call 0800 no dump for that. That's on big, more serious parts of dumping. You can get fined an on-the-spot fine for littering of up to $400, but look, we're not wanting to have those sort of things in place, and I personally wouldn't say there was, enough say it was a massive issue like that. And I'm sure most people aren't necessarily meaning to, drop it out of their pocket or whatever. So we don't want to go heavy-handed on people. There is that kind of stick approach, but, the carrot approach is just having a good, clean environment, parks and streets. So
Are those instant fines? Are those instant fines, Richard? Someone can just write out a ticket for $400?
Yeah, our compliance officers can do that, but it's very seldom happens.
And just to be clear, this 0800 no dump line, you're not suggesting that people ring that and say, hey, I saw a quite tall woman with dirty blonde hair and a white shirt dropping a mask in Queen Street, are you?
No. That's more for, massive, if someone was dropping a whole, bags of PPE or something off somewhere from their workplace or something like that, that would be an issue. But no, that's not a number we'd be calling just for seeing people litter.
So, to sum it up, you are basically appealing to people's goodwill here and their pride as, well, tidy Kiwis, to put their masks in the bin, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a lot of people message myself and the Mayor and others and say, what are you doing about this? And really, it's just a, personal responsibility, collective responsibility to keep our environment clean. But the main message is still use whatever mask or face covering you can and not to shame anyone for using a single-use mask. But if you are using single-use masks, is to keep putting them in the bin.
Auckland Councillor Richard Hills there. The cat's out of the bag. Well, actually, it's twin tamarin monkeys. The two tiny endangered golden lion tamarins were actually born in July, but until today, Auckland Zoo had kept their birth a secret. Mum, Frida, was unable to produce milk, so when they were just 2 days old, staff made the tough decision to hand rear them. If you're watching us tonight, you'll be able to see in the photos just how teeny tiny these guys really are. They're a first for the zoo and two of just 2,500 in the wild. Joining us now is Auckland Zoo's Primate leader, Amy Robbins. Amy, how big were these guys when they were born? Because they still look pretty tiny.
Yeah, they're not very big monkeys. They were around about 50 grams when they were first born, and at weigh-in at 6 o'clock this morning, they were about 130 grams.
Wow. And for people who can't see them, can you just sort of describe what do these characters look like?
Yep, so golden lion tamarins are a New World monkey. They're very small and they are bright orange. They're a really beautiful animal, and they get their name because they have a big orange mane of hair. They've got a long tail and, probably the size of a guinea pig, I guess.
Yeah, and very elfin looking. Talk us through how you hand rear them. It must be, well, around the clock kind of job, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it's been really intense and a really difficult process, but also a huge privilege and really enjoyable as well. So initially, when we first took them off Frida for hand rearing, we were feeding them every 2 hours, and that was right up until midnight. So we'd start at 6 a.m. and would feed. There's a small team of us that feed. We keep a small team for consistency. And so we'd feed up until midnight, and then gradually as they've become, they've put on weight and they've had some good growth and some good progress, then we've been able to sort of reduce their reliance on the milk and increase the amount of solids they're eating, which has also meant that we can increase the gaps between the feeds. So,
and because because they are so little, what are you using to get the food into them?
Yeah, so initially it was a tiny 1 ml syringe, and the amount that they were drinking was ridiculously small. It was probably around about 0.2 of a ml initially, every couple of hours. But that's because they grow so fast. They have such a really quick dependency and growth period. It's been really rapid, and so now they're taking around about sort of 10 mils between them, but the bulk of their food is solid. So we were feeding them in tiny little syringes with a tiny little teat, gradually got rid of the teat and fed from a syringe, and now they feed themselves from a plate.
And have they been separated from their mum and dad the whole time?
No, so they don't have full contact with their parents just yet because we need to be able to get them back to feed them, and once they go back to mum and dad, we're not going to get them back. And so what they've been doing is to have visual and auditory contact with their parents for the entire time. They were in an incubator for the initial stages, and now we've moved them into what we call a satellite home. So within the sort of back of house night room area where Frida and Alonzo live, we've put this smaller little satellite home where the babies live full time, and so the parents can be all around them and they can touch them in a protected way while we're not there.
And we're almost out of time, but what are they, boys or girls, and do they have names?
We've got a male and a female, and my team has just named them. The male is called Rufino, and the female is called Aurora.
And personalities, very quickly, are they lively?
Amazing. Yes, they're sassy. They're like toddlers, twin toddlers, sassy and full of energy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That is Amy Robbins, who's Auckland Zoo's primate leader, and she was talking there about these two tiny little twin tamarin monkeys. You really have to see them. They're very elfin and they're almost like little cartoon characters. We'll put the pictures up on our web page, but Mum was unable to produce milk, so she couldn't look after them, and as she said, they've been hand-rearing them for some time now with tiny little syringes. They are so cute. Check them out. If you love the rhino, you will love this.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. 3 teenage girls have pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of live-in woman Grace Virtue. The 90-year-old died from a brain injury 3 weeks ago after a home invasion and assault in November last year. The trio, who have had name suppression, pleaded not guilty to murder and have been on trial at the High Court in Palmerston North. However, this afternoon they decided to plead guilty to manslaughter. The 3 teenagers will be sentenced on November the 13th. A court has heard a Comanchero gang associate had $1 million in cash to buy a large amount of methamphetamine ingredient for the gang before the deal fell over at the last minute. 5 people are on trial at the High Court in Auckland on various drug and money laundering charges linked to the Comancheros, including the president, Pasirika Naufahu. One charge is conspiring to supply the Class B drug pseudoephedrine. Prosecutor David Johnstone says Mr Naufahu organised for his co-defendant Connor Clausen to buy the pseudoephedrine from a third party.
Parked on the side of a road in Takanini, Connor Clausen pulled in front of him, but for one reason or another, although there was moves to deliver the $1 million of cash at that stage, the deal didn't go ahead.
The Crown Prosecutor David Johnstone. The Mental Health Foundation says a disturbing video shared on social media could cause real harm. The video deals with suicide. Chief Executive Sean Robinson says because of media coverage and sharing of the video online, he wants New Zealanders to feel confident they can mitigate the harm. He advises parents to have open and supportive conversations with their children. Mr Robinson says adults must ensure children are supported to talk about things that concern them and can access any help they need. He says banning social media isn't the answer, but children need to talk about what they see without fear of punishment. National says Labor's promise to reduce pay wave fees for small businesses is a fig leaf. Labor says if re-elected it will tighten regulation to reduce the fees charged by banks for things such as contactless payment and card transactions. It's estimated retailers in New Zealand are paying 50% more than their Australian counterparts. National leader Judith Collins says while they support the move, this doesn't cover up costs imposed under Labor that are hurting small businesses, like the minimum wage increase, fuel taxes and 90-day trials.
What I would say, though, it's a bit of a fig leaf to cover all the other costs that they've landed onto small business. So it's a pretty small fig leaf too.
Judith Collins says small businesses are doing it extremely tough right now and they need more support. The Greens co-leader James Shaw has made his first public appearance since the private Green School saga to kickstart the party's election campaign in Wellington. The co-leader faced severe public backlash for his championing of the Taranaki school to receive more taxpayer funding, which is at odds with the party's policy on private schools. James Shaw says the Green School may impact votes, but he's hoping the Greens at 3 years in government will win over voters.
I think when people look at our track record of action on climate change, and conservation and on ending inequality in this country, I think that people will be able to make their own mind up about, whether or not we should be part of the next government.
James Shaw spoke to students today at Victoria University of Wellington and will take part in the notorious Aro Valley candidate debate tonight. Another Auckland supermarket has been closed and given a deep clean after a visit by a positive COVID-19 case. The infected person shopped at the Countdown Lynn Mall in the suburb of New Lynn between 8 o'clock and 8:30 last Friday night. Countdown says the Auckland Regional Public Health Service has deemed the visit as low risk. There are 6 new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand today. 2 are imported cases and the other 4 are new cases in the community with links to the Auckland August cluster. New research challenges whether green certified Homestar houses are actually warmer and drier than other new builds. The Homestar system is a national rating tool used by the Green Building Council to score homes on a scale of 6 to 10. The study by 2 Auckland University researchers measured indoor temperatures of 30 social houses with a 6-star rating compared to code-compliant new builds and older homes. During winter, the Homestar rated houses were not significantly warmer and in summer were hotter. One of the researchers, Rochelle Aid, told Checkpoint it raises questions that need further research.
To be clear, this was a case study of 30 houses in Auckland, so the findings are at this time limited to social housing in Auckland. I believe they could be replicated across different social housing in Auckland, but I wouldn't want to say that these findings would be found, say, in Wellington or Christchurch.
Rochelle Aid. It's 5 minutes past 6. In sport, a leading administrator says the financial impact on Netball New Zealand will be crippling if the Silver Ferns don't play international opposition in the country this year. The Silver Ferns international calendar has yet to be confirmed for this year, despite a squad being named last month. New Zealand Netball Players Association Executive Manager Steph Bond told a United via Sport webcast that the sport is relying on the government to allow sides like Australia to be able to quarantine and play in New Zealand.
Absolutely, we need to get teams to New Zealand, and that's pivotal really to the finances at Netball New Zealand, and being able to get teams across the border and actually have them isolate and be in bubbles in New Zealand and be able to participate in New Zealand would be exceptional.
Steph Bond. World women's tennis number 1 Ashley Barty will not defend her French Open title in a massive blow to the Grand Slam event. Uncomfortable about travelling during the coronavirus pandemic, Barty is the biggest name to so far opt out of the major, which is set to start in Paris later this month. American Dustin Johnson has captured the largest payday in golf by winning the Tour Championship in Atlanta to claim his first FedEx Cup title and pocket $22 million. And Barcelona star Lionel Messi has returned to training following his failed attempt to leave the Spanish football club. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Brian Roper from the University of Otago takes a look at the harsh realities of how our electronic devices are produced. Tony Stamp is joined on Song Crush by Brad Warrington and Maggie Tweedy, discussing the new songs they can't stop thinking about. And on Worlds of Music, Trevor Reiki has an interview with American musician, archivist and record collector David Murray. That's Nights with me, Melody Thomas, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service till midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine weather apart from cloudy periods for Northland and elsewhere tomorrow evening. Waikato to Manawatu including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow with patchy drizzle about the Tararua Ranges and the coast at night. Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and northern Canterbury, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing this evening with drizzle developing tomorrow morning, turning to rain tomorrow night, possibly heavy in Westland. For southern Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine tonight, rain spreading north tomorrow, snow lowering to 900 metres at night, norwesterlies rising to severe gale in exposed places for a time tomorrow. Fiordland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, turning to rain with heavy falls tomorrow morning, then clearing in the afternoon, showers developing at night. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. RNZ National. It's almost 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome back. This is Checkpoint, and I'm Lisa Owen. The Green Building Council denies it's trying to undermine research that questions whether its Homestar rating tool is promising more than it's delivering. The program run by the Green Building Council rates homes on a scale of 6 to 10. According to the system, a rating of 10 or more means the home will be easier and more cost-effective to keep warm, healthy and more environmentally friendly than a typical new house built to building code. But a study by 2 Auckland University researchers found properties rated 6 on the Homestar scale underperformed compared to other new builds, dropping below recommended minimum winter temperatures more than 55% of the time and chronically overheating in summer. In an email sent by the council to, quote, valued partners, it questions the integrity of the study and one of the researchers and asks the recipients to keep the discussion document confidential. I asked Green Building Council Chief Executive Andrew Eagles what he thinks of the research.
Yeah, so that's interesting to see, and that's it's useful to get that perspective. We'd like to see more research around that topic. I think that it's really important to note that the tools are built up with a large group of community around in the construction and property sector, and this is one of the pieces of feedback. It's good to have that. The tool is in the process of being improved. It will have a new version out next year, and that's been in the running for a year and a half. I think this is some input, and we welcome that. I think it'd be good if there was a larger number of properties, and if there was a wider range of property types. I think that would be really useful. But look, it's welcome. We're a not-for-profit. We get input from everybody to improve buildings and homes, and it's really useful to have that.
You sent out a 6-page document, I think it is, discussing this research. What was the purpose of that?
We had some people who use or looking to use Homestar were interested in other perspectives and feedback on the report, so we put that together to brief them.
Okay, in that particular document, you say, while not explicit in her research, Ms. Payne, which is Rochelle Aid, has publicly shown support for Passive House Standard in preference to Homestar. This may, in part, explain some of the perspective in her research against Homestar. What do you mean by that?
What we're getting into there is just around in the sector, there's some interest in other ways of getting things done, and so we're just referring to that interest. But fundamentally, we're a large community that all want healthy and warm homes, and so we're all working together to improve those outcomes for New Zealand.
Can you understand why that might look like you are attacking her research and her integrity, which has been peer-reviewed? You say this may in part explain some of the perspectives in her research. It's independent research that's peer-reviewed. Are you suggesting that personal opinions or statement has, affected the outcome of that research?
No, we're not suggesting that. And indeed, the research is useful to have, and it helps inform how we're moving ahead. Indeed, much of these concerns have already been dealt with in a tool that's going to be launched pretty soon. And we did set that out to Ms. Payne about a year ago.
So, do you accept the findings of the research?
I think it would be useful to build upon it with a deeper number of homes and a wider range of housing types. So, in some areas, the research just looks at apartments, for instance, and in some instances just social housing. So, what we're really interested to do is build up a better.
So, does it have value or not?
Project. It's a useful perspective, as I say. We got 100 responses to our most recent Homestar consultation, and further, we're working with brands to increase the number of homes that can be assessed against Homestar, so we can learn even more. But it's great to have lots of people have input and build upon what we're doing, so we can get better homes for Aotearoa. Clearly, it's a huge issue because our homes are damp and mouldy, so we want to encourage more research and get more information out there.
Again, you say that this report has been prepared for a small number of our valued partners who may come across and question commentary offered by individuals seeking to detract from the value of Homestar. Again, what do you mean by that? Seeking to detract? It's independent research. The findings are simply the findings, are they not?
Well, I guess, this is... We were asked to provide comment back to some people who were looking at this, so we put this report together to help inform them. We've seen the research and it's useful to have, and we really welcome it, along with other feedback and input we get on the tools. So as I say, with Homestar, we've just had 100 different people feedback because it's going through such a resurgence and lots of people building to higher standards, and so it was useful to have, and it's good to be having these discussions.
How many people did you send this document to?
I'd have to check. I haven't actually got that.
And why did you ask them to keep it confidential, keep it to themselves?
Well, I guess that there's a sense that we would like to have these conversations in a measured way, and it's. I think that's how we talked about that with them. I'd have to check why it was actually kept confidential.
Were you trying to undermine this researcher? Because she is concerned that you are trying to undermine the findings of her study and her reputation by circulating this document in which you, raise allegations about the findings of her research, particularly where you say that some of her opinions may have swayed the research findings, in essence.
I think that... I think if we wanted to undermine her, presumably we'd go public and be more forceful about it. I think there would be far firmer ways of doing that if one wanted to, which we didn't take.
And that's Andrew Eagles, and the Green Building Council has confirmed there is no independent research that supports the claims made about the Homestar rating tool. And some of your feedback on that, this listener says, so pleased to see this research being done into the Homestar ratings and the Green Building Council. The ratings were developed for freezing northern European countries and just not relevant or necessary for New Zealand climate. The extra cost does not justify the results when our new building code already provides for requirements for warm, healthy homes. And Meredith has got in touch to say passive house standards are the way to go on many levels. Science and physics based. New homes are full of cold bridges, which are made worse in many ways by more insulation. Window design and insulation also a huge factor in heat gain and loss. We need to change our standard construction details and retrain the industry how to put houses together that work. Thank you for your feedback on that. Let's go to the Green Party now on the campaign trail. Green Party co-leader James Shaw has made his first appearance since the Green School saga derailed his party's election plans. James Shaw attended a Wellington Central debate at the Victoria University of Wellington to kick off his campaign. Our political reporter Charlie Drever was there and filed this report.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
That's James Shaw getting ready for his Round 2 2020 election debut at an event held by the Students' Association at Victoria University. COVID-19 has meant that it was far from the packed halls usually experienced in the lead up to an election. Instead, fewer than 40 people sat in on today's debate, while it was live streamed on social media. James Shaw says he missed the buzz of a rowdy audience.
It is quite a weird experience as a candidate because a lot of what you do is you connect with people in the audience, and when they're down the barrel of a camera, it's obviously quite a different experience. But we've all got to adapt to the changed circumstances that we find ourselves in and make the best of it.
Student issues were the main focus of the debate, and Mr Shaw made a promise to address living costs.
$250 a week is not enough to live on. You need at least a minimum of $325 a week. So at this election, we're campaigning on a guaranteed minimum income for people who need it. Obviously, that's people who are unemployed or underemployed, but it also includes students, both undergrad and postgrad students.
The topic of education landed the co-leader in hot water in recent weeks when he signed off on the almost $12 million in government funding to go to the private Green School in Taranaki. That move at odds with the Green stance on private schools. He's hoping it won't cast too much of a shadow over campaigning.
When people look at our track record of action on climate change and conservation and on ending inequality in this country, I think that people will be able to make their own mind up about, whether or not we should be part of the next government.
With polls having the Greens teetering on the 5% threshold, the party is fighting for every vote. However, James Shaw was feeling at ease meeting students at the uni bar, feeling more than prepared from his past experience of campaigning to Kiwis in London.
The problem is, how do you find them, right? You can't go door knocking or anything like that. So, where do you find Kiwis in London?
That's a great job.
At the pub, precisely.
Although for some reason his star sign didn't win him any points among astrology fans.
Taurus.
James Shaw will be swapping the beers for water tonight, where he'll be speaking at the Aro debate, notorious for soaking candidates with water pistols. From Wellington, for Checkpoint, Court Charlie Drever, DNA.
A court has heard a Comanchero associate drove through Auckland with $1 million in cash to buy a methamphetamine precursor before the deal fell over. 5 people are on trial at the High Court at Auckland on various drug and money laundering charges. They were arrested after more than $3.7 million in assets were seized in raids in April last year. Jordan Bond was in court.
Along with money laundering charges relating to a $100,000 Bentley. The Comanchero's president, Pasilika Naufahu, is charged with conspiring to commit 2 drug-related offences. 2 years ago, in September 2018, the Crown alleges Mr Naufahu organised for his now co-defendant, Connor Clausen, to complete the final stage of a pseudoephedrine deal, swapping the money for the drugs. The Crown prosecutor, David Johnston, says at a pre-arranged location the 2 parties pulled up. One had $1 million, the other had the pseudoephedrine.
Parked on the side of a road in Takanini, Connor Clausen pulled in front of him, but for one reason or another, although there was moves to deliver the $1 million of cash at that stage, the deal didn't go ahead.
The specifics of the allegations, including bugged phone calls and visual surveillance, will be outlined in more detail for the jury later in the trial.
It'll be for you to consider the evidence the Crown's able to advance about this arrangement, dealings on the side of the road in Takanini, and come to a view about whether you're sure Mr Naufahu was part of an agreement over the $1 million of pseudoephedrine and whether Mr Clausen was part of an agreement.
Mr Johnston said the Crown would call a witness who'd subsequently been convicted of importing methamphetamine. That'll be in relation to a separate charge, one of conspiring to import a Class A drug, which was either methamphetamine or cocaine. The Crown isn't sure which one, but both are Class A. The prosecution says this man had an importation agreement with Mr Naufahu, which fell through, so he carried it out himself and was subsequently caught.
So I expect that he'll be in a position to describe how it was that he had this arrangement where he was attempting to put together a drug import. And I expect he'll be able to tell you about how he spoke with Mr Naufahu about that idea and about how Mr Naufahu was interested and indeed reached an arrangement that he would help with the process.
The first 2 witnesses were called this afternoon, one of whom is a man whose identity can't be revealed. He was the director of a company with links to one defendant, a media personality. The Crown says that company paid pretend salaries to Mr Naufahu to disguise the true source of his wealth. The Crown says the man was brought on board and used his credit rating, which was better than the defendant's, to purchase equipment for the business. The trial continues. Atuiti ko te mātua, I Tamaki Makaurau, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
It is 23 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Wellington school has criticised the actions of students who used homophobic language and images in videos posted on social media. The posts were uploaded by one student and shared on Instagram over the weekend, following the school's Pride Week. The school has taken action and the headmaster says the attitudes are against Scots College's values. Members of the school's Queer Straight Alliance say they hope the issue will become a catalyst for change at the school. Harry Locke reports.
It was Scots College's inaugural Pride Week, organised by the school's Queer Straight Alliance, and included events such as a mufti day and form group activities. Eleanor, a Year 12 member of the QSA, helped run it.
It was really cool to see how the school actually engaged with that, and because every person that wore colour did it meaningfully. And overall, we've received an outpouring of support for our week through the staff and the majority of the students as well.
On Friday, a number of images and videos from one student's Snapchat account began circling on other social media. The videos and posts showed some students using homophobic slurs and using rainbow flag stickers in inappropriate ways. In one post, there was the caption, "Boycotting Gay Pride Week 2020, written in rainbow-coloured writing. Eleanor describes her reaction.
Overall, I've just been really, really disappointed that this could happen in my school, and these people are my peers that have these views. I struggle to think how people can have this blatant disrespect towards the community.
In a statement to RNZ, the headmaster of the Wellington-based private school, Graham Ewell, said they took immediate action. The students involved and their families were contacted, and the issue was raised during an assembly. Another student who is part of the Queer Straight Alliance, who wanted to be known as R, says it's highlighted the issue of homophobia.
It's put it a lot more out in the open. Even though this event did happen, it's sped up the process of helping get full support from everyone. This is an issue which goes on in many, many schools. It just happened to bubble up during our Pride Week.
Headmaster Graham Ewell says the college is discussing with students and the QSA group to determine the best way to raise awareness of their work. For the pupils in question, the school is exploring a mixture of restorative, educational and other possible actions to ensure they understand the consequences. R says a collective response is now needed.
What needs to continue is a lot of small steps, I think. I feel like it's lots of enforcement on if somebody says something, holding them accountable for it, and it's also making sure that the information is out there for people who are using terms but do not know the meanings behind them.
The student who uploaded the offensive material has posted an apology on social media, saying he did not intend to use the words in a discriminating manner. Joel Tebbs, the founding member of Wellington College's Queer Straight Alliance, says he hopes something positive will be able to come out of the event.
We've had similar situations like this at Colt in the past, and it's really progressed our school to make better actions. For sure, our culture has really changed. These sort of situations aren't ever exclusive to one school. They're shared across the whole country. So it really shows that the culture in all schools around the country has to move forward.
Scots College student Eleanor says it hasn't deterred them.
Sometimes it takes one action to actually spout a whole lot of change, and what the QSA was doing beforehand was a lot of change. But now we've got even more people behind us, I think, because they've realised how affected everyone is by this action, how wrong it is.
In an Instagram post, the school's head prefect said the incident has left the community both shocked and hurt, but it shouldn't overshadow the work of the QSA. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
The COVID-19 lockdowns have been a lonely experience for many people across the world who haven't been able to see their loved ones. A study has been carried out at care homes in the UK about how robots can mimic the company of a close friend. And researchers believe their use could be valuable during the pandemic. The BBC's Mark Easton reports.
Hello, Peter.
In a care home in Bedfordshire. Hello, Pepper. Peter the human and Pepper the robot have become friends.
Nice to see you again. Tell me, what was the most difficult thing that you and your family had to go through during the Second World War?
Well, it was the fact... Pepper's been programmed to play games or music, ask about meals, organise calls to relatives. But most importantly, Pepper is a great listener.
I also once think I saw a doodle bug.
Thank you for sharing this with me. It is interesting to know more about you.
In the jargon, Pepper is a culturally aware robot.
Do you feel that Pepper is your friend? All the time I'm with him, yes.
Really?
Yes.
You don't think that's a bit odd, having a robot as a friend?
Well, life can be a bit odd sometimes, especially the older you get.
The idea that a computer could be a carer feels, well, alien. But an academic evaluation suggests that robots actually can do a pretty good job.
I was a bit too keen on modern jazz.
They viewed the robot almost like a person after the 2 weeks. You know, they didn't just see it as a tool or a robot. They saw it as something that they could really connect with.
Hello, Mark.
Pepper never needs to wear PPE. Can a machine really understand compassion?
I am just a machine. The participants found me to be compassionate, and that's what matters.
We cannot say that the robot is feeling real emotion or wants to care. But what is very important is the perception that people have. So when you see the robot, you will see something that will behave as if it cares about people.
Alexa, answer the front door. Okay.
Demand for care services is increasing and the system is struggling to cope. But can artificial intelligence ever offer a real relationship?
Quite a few people get anxious that we're thinking of replacing carers. That's absolutely not the case. It is, how can we use the technology to make our care staff more effective and efficient? And the technology is there to support us in doing so.
I hope you had fun together.
We like to believe that empathy is a human trait. But troubling though it may be, it appears some robots are actually more caring than some people.
Mark Easton reporting there. Just some of your feedback before we head off. Jill says, I walk regularly around the peninsula at Bucklands Beach. Yesterday I counted 5 masks lying around. Wake up, New Zealand, says Jill. That's about people dumping their disposable masks. On NCA credits, this person says bonus credits or bogus credits. Why not see results and use scaling? If you need some sunshine in your life, go online to our page and see the twin golden lion tamarin monkeys. They're the size of a teeny tiny chocolate bar, and even better, cute.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. 3 teenage girls on trial for the murder of a 90-year-old live-in woman have pleaded guilty to her manslaughter. A Māori terminal bowel cancer patient says her disease could have been caught earlier if the age for the screening program was lowered to 50. Another Auckland supermarket has been closed and given a deep clean after a visit by a positive COVID-19 case. The Mental Health Foundation says a disturbing video about suicide shared on social media could cause real harm. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
A special place for all Kiwis, including the 257 people lost on Erebus, whom we honour and remember now and into the future.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
He will face something like 18 charges linked to